All right. Here we go. And let me pull up my little sign to remind me to always start the recording. All right. Beginning the lecture, guys. You didn't miss anything. You just keep recording. It's just starting now. So Peter Drucker, like I said, in the 80s, I mean, I read his books. He was like a guard. He was like a god. And he was like the guru back at the time of management theory. You know, understanding management history can assist you in determining the kind of management style you prefer. It really does. And Peter Drucker had a lot of influence on me. He had a lot of ideas about organizations, how they should be formed, and how to practice management. And the 4 bullet points are kind of like the big themes. The big things he came up with. Workers should be treated as just assets, right? Workers are not expendable. Workers are not a liability. They're assets. We'll talk a lot about that going through the course, because I deeply believe this, that labor, that not only workers are an asset, but we should treat the cost of labor as more of an asset. And we'll talk about that further in the course. He believed that corporations should be considered a human community, probably because it is. And that's the main reason he believed that. And there is no business without a customer. Absolutely not. 100% true. You can't have business without the customer. Without the customer, you don't get any money. Revenue doesn't come in. Remember, we talk about revenue and sales. Revenue and sales are the same thing. Revenue doesn't come in, you don't have a business. Institutionalized management practices are preferable to charismatic cult leaders. Absolutely. Putting in good systems, having good culture, having good management practices, that's the key to a successful organization. Not having some leader that everybody worships. Which we saw back in my day, we saw with GE. Jack Welch was the CEO back then. Everyone thought, oh, Jack Welch is a god. Jack Welch was never a god to me. 6 practical reasons for studying the chapter, and we're going to go through all this stuff as we go through. Understanding of the present, where we are now, and a guide to action to make things happen. This chapter is a great source for new ideas. You're going to hear a lot of things from the beginning of management theory all the way up until now. Clues to the meaning of your manager's decisions. You'll get it if you're someone who's being managed, which is almost all of us. I mean, I'm a college professor, but I'm still managed. My dean manages me, or deans. Actually, I have 2 different deans that I work under. They don't micromanage me by any stretch of the imagination. They're very cool, but they do manage the program. They do manage to an extent what we do. And clues to the meaning of outside events, and producing positive results, which, if you want to succeed as a manager, you need to do. So this slide gives you an overview of basically what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to start with the classical viewpoint of management theory, go to the behavioral viewpoint, the quantitative viewpoint, and then the systems viewpoint. We're going to talk about contingency theory. It says contingency viewpoint. It's mainly contingency theory. And then contemporary approaches to management, modern day contemporary approaches to management. But we're going to talk at the beginning here about where it all came from. That was the classical viewpoint, when they first started studying management theory. And this was literally in the late 1800s, going into the early 1900s. You had scientific and administrative management. The pioneer of scientific management was Frederick Taylor, who you see there. And the Gilbreths were another team that they were part of it too, but Frederick Taylor was the big one. We're going to talk about scientific management, administrative management, which was Spalding, Fayol, and Weber, and then the problem with the classical viewpoint, in which we will talk about. The classical viewpoint, they didn't treat people like people. They looked at people like they're machines, and people are not machines. You can't treat them like machines, but we'll get more of that later. So Frederick Taylor came out with the scientific management. He is the father of it. And he had 4 principles of it. One was to evaluate a task by scientifically studying each part of it. So he would look at tasks that laborers were doing in factories. Got to remember when this was. You're talking late 1800s, in the early 1900s. You're talking the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So most of the management was being done in factories. He looked at carefully selecting workers with the right abilities to do certain tasks, give workers the training and incentives to do the task with the proper work methods, and to use scientific principles to plan the work methods and ease the way the workers do their job. So he was applying the scientific method of study to labor. It was new. No one had ever done it. So he was, it was huge at the time when he came out with this, because he did improve productivity for a lot of the places that he consulted with and with his ideas. The Gilbreaths were also part of this. They have both studied industrial engineering. They identified 17 basic motions and applied them to the work process, like human motions. All right. They demonstrated they could eliminate motions while reducing the fatigue of some workers. So they were watching how workers were working, and they were finding better ways for them to do their job. The Gilberts are important because they reinforce the link between studying physical movements in a job and workers' efficiency. We still do that to an extent, by the way, but a lot of times now when we're looking at workers' movement, it's not just about efficiency for productivity. It is about health, right? Because we have learned something they didn't understand back then, and that is that repetitive movement is one of the biggest dangers in any industry. I work in the hospitality industry. I talked about that last week, and you'll be hearing about that as we go through. But honestly, in the hospitality industry, we learned that years ago, that the big one, the bad one, is repetitive movement. Repetitive movement. The one job in my entire industry that has the most injuries, housekeeping in hotels. The people that clean your rooms. Why? Because of constant repetitive movement. And because they put themselves, they're always either on their knees or they're bending over or and they had to come up with different ways. And it was the Gilbreaths that actually started all this. And the ways that they have changed what housekeeping does is not just for efficiency, but for health reasons. One is the stand-up vacuum. If you go in a hotel or any kind of office building now, you see someone vacuuming, they're not bending over vacuuming like the vacuum you have at home. They're standing up. That vacuum is a backpack, and they're standing up vacuuming. Why? So it does not hurt their back. It doesn't injure their back through repetitive movement. So then we bring in Charles Clinton Spaulding, was the father of African-American management. And Spaulding brought in a lot of neat theories, for his day, very enlightened, actually. The need for authority. He believed in the division of labor, which they were just starting to get into at the time. He came out with some good theories about it. Having adequate capital, proper budgeting, cooperation, and teamwork. He felt these were the keys when he was studying management at the time. Now remember, this is late early 1900s. Highlighted the need to enrich the lives of the organizational and the community family. He was also focusing on making a profit, because that has to be part of it. And we get in the next chapter, chapter 3, we're going to talk about what's important. And there are other things in business that are important, but making a profit is one of the things that is important. It's the reason you're there. That's how everyone makes money. Well, we'll talk about that. So we get into administrative management after that. And that was pioneered by Spaulding, Fayol, and Weber. And guys, all this is in your book. I'm doing a highlight, but it's all in your book. Fayol was, remember, I want you reading the book. You got to read the chapters. Okay? Don't skimp on reading the chapters. There's stuff, I do everything in the lecture. I do a lot in the lecture, but there's stuff that chapters I want you to get to. Fayol was not the first to investigate management behavior. He was not, but he was the first to systemize it. He produced a work called The General Industrial Management. It was translated in English in 1930. Fayol was the first to identify major functions of management, and he is where we get planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. Well, how about that? The 4 things we're going to be studying this entire semester. We talked about this last week. Planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. That all came from Fayol in his studies. Weber, and I love this one, he thought bureaucracy was rational, efficient, and an ideal organization based on principles of logic. In our modern day, we hate bureaucracy, but back in his day, they viewed it as a way to do business. If you had bureaucracy, it meant you were organized and you knew what you were doing. Nightmare. But nightmare nowadays. I mean, when people complain about the government or big corporations, what's the first thing they complain about? Bureaucracy. I approached Wegmans for a charity donation for the charity I work with. And I had to go online and I had to fill out this 6-page form and answer all these questions. Most of them had nothing to do with what I was asking for. And it took a couple hours. And after I was done, it took a month to get back to me. And I got a $75 gift certificate. which was nice, but I feed needy families. I could have used like a $500 gift certificate, to be honest with you, but they gave me a $75 gift. And I mean, but that is an example of bureaucracy. You know, have to go through a whole bunch of crap to get something tiny. But Spalding felt that better performing organizations should have 5 bureaucratic features, a well-defined hierarchy of authority, which actually I agree with him on that. You should have a well-defined hierarchy of authority. And we'll talk about organization later on in the chat or in the book. And I talk about it in Business 100 if you had that. But, you know, no one should have 2 bosses. You know, a well-defined hierarchy of authority is you have one boss and he has one boss and that sort of thing. Until you get to the top, then you have to deal with the board of directors. So that's a different deck of cards there. He felt they should have formal rules and procedures. I also agree with that. There should be rules and procedures. A clear division of labor, with parts of complex job being handled by specialists. Absolutely. Impersonality without reference or connection to a particular person. I don't agree with that. There has to be a personality and a culture. You have to connect with people. And careers based on merit. Well, depends on how you define merit. Careers that are earned, sure. But people also need to be developed. And there wasn't a lot of this going on in the classical period of management theory. There wasn't a whole lot of development. The whole problem with the classical viewpoint is it's too mechanistic. It treats people like they're cogs. It treats people like they're parts of machines. You know, it's a huge flaw. They don't even take into account human needs. All right. The essence of the viewpoint was that work activity was a meaningful and a rational approach. They only viewed the work as if a robot was doing it. They weren't thinking about the people, because back then, you know, all this was new. It was all pretty new. I mean, the industrial age started in the very late 1700s to early 1800s. You're talking the late 1800s. You're only talking 100 years. Now, you may think that's a long time. When you're talking about the development of a social structure, it's a very short time. So they were still treating people like cogs and nuts and bolts and machines. The classical viewpoint also led to such innovations as management by objectives and goal setting, which are good things. There is actually a way of managing called management by objectives. I'm not a big fan. Okay. Goal setting, I am a big fan of, and we'll talk about that down the road. I'm not a big fan of management by objectives. It works for some industries. It didn't work for mine. And they try to, at one point in my career, they try to shove it down our throats. And I'm like, no, we are all like, this doesn't work for us. So after we got out of that whole mechanized classical era, we got into behaviorism, which dealt with human relations and behavioral science. All right. This viewpoint emphasized the importance of understanding human behavior and motivating employees toward achievement. A huge difference. All right. So we're going to talk about early behaviorism theories, the human relations movement that occurred late 50s, early 60s, and behavioral science as we approach it today. Early behaviorism, pioneered by Munsterberg, Follett, and Mayo. That's a picture of Munsterberg there, and I think that is a cigarette holder in his hand. Look at that long thing in his hand with a thing at the end. I think that's a cigarette holder. Like you used to see if you watch like old black and white 1930s movies, they'll be holding the very long cigarette with a cigarette holder with a cigarette at the end. I couldn't tell, but I swear to God, I think that's in the way he's holding it. I think that's what that is. Crazy. But the human relations movement came along. That was pioneered by Maslow and McGregor. We're going to talk about Maslow tonight. We're going to talk about McGregor tonight, because what they did for management theory was stupendous. And a lot of what we do today comes out of the work that they built. In fact, McGregor's work came out of Maslow's work. And we use Maslow's work in management. We also use it in marketing. McGregor's work is only management. In fact, your discussion question is about McGregor, and it's about his management theories, because I want you to be that familiar with them. I want you to discuss them and work on them and that type of thing. We're going to watch a video about Maslow here later on. And then we're going to talk about the behavioral science approach after that. So Hugo Munsterberg, with his long cigarette holder, he is called the father of industrial psychology. He suggested that psychologists could contribute to the industry, and this was not a thing in the classical era. When we talk about psychology, we need to look at how people move and how they turn in their motions and try to make their jobs more efficient so they can be more productive. That was the old way. These guys are coming in and saying, no, we got to think about the people themselves. That's when it first started. Study jobs and determine which people are best suited for specific jobs. This is back when all these things like personality and intelligence studies and all these started coming out for determining employees and who you're going to hire for what jobs. Some of the studies, some of these things they use, I still don't think work, but I think you kind of have to get to know somebody, but they can be effective to an extent. I'll put it that way. Identify the psychological conditions under which employees do their best work. Absolutely. This occurred during this era, the behaviorism era, and we will get into the studies that were conducted that came up with that. Devise management strategies to influence employees to follow management's interests. So instead of just telling them, come up with ways to get them to do it. So it wasn't just, carrot, it was getting away from carrot and stick, right? Carrot and stick is an old adage we use in management. Basically, managers that are carrot and stick, and we'll get into this when we get into McGregor. But carrot and stick was, there's two things. You get the carrot, which is a reward, or you get the stick, which is a punishment, right? And that's the way management was in the United States for a couple hundred years. And this was when it was just starting to get away from that. In fact, when I first came into management in the early 80s or the mid 80s, we were still doing that. There were companies still doing that. Mary Parker Follett, she was lauded as a female pioneer in the fields of civics and psychology, or sociology, a brilliant woman. She thought organizations should become more democratic, that managers should work with their employees, and they should. You should be talking to your people and working with your people. But she was the first one to introduce this idea. And she felt three key ideas in making organizations more democratic. We're not going to get deep in what she did, but she really pushed for management, working with employees, having an employees committee, getting their input. Why? Because they're on the front line. They're the ones seeing everything, and they can bring the real problems to you, all right? The true problems that you need to be working with. Mayo, well, he led a Harvard research group, and they conducted what is now today called the Hawthorne study. The Hawthorne study led to the Hawthorne effect. This was in the late 1920s. Now, what the slide gives you is employees worked harder if they received additional attention, and they thought managers cared about their welfare, or that if supervisors paid attention to them. That's not what they were trying to do at all. Western Electric, which was an electric company out in Illinois, they're actually nationwide, but Hawthorne went in. They went in and they basically went in and they did a study at the Hawthorne plant. That's what it was Hawthorne plant. And all they were trying to study was, Mayo said, let's try adjusting the light levels. Do people work better or worse under certain light levels? And that's all he was looking at. And the study came out that the study was ineffective, but they found something from it. It was one of these things that bombed, but they got something out of it. Because what they did was they went in and talked to the workers. And they said, hey, we're going to adjust the lights, and we're watching you and seeing what you do and seeing how the lights, the lights affect how you work. And the workers got all excited, and they said, sure. And their productivity went up like 20%, the whole study. So the study was a bust because they're adjusting the lights, and the lights had nothing to do with the production. So why did the production jump so high? Well, it jumped so high because they knew they were being studied. They felt they were they were part of something bigger. They felt that they were part of something important. They were excited. They were motivated. So the Hawthorne effect taught us that, hey, there's a lot more to managing than just working with people's movements and trying to get them to do things, beating them or yelling at them. No, or giving them a treat if they do well. Here's a bonus. Good job. The Hawthorne was the first study that told us there's more to managing than just telling people what to do. These people were motivated because they were in a scientific study and they were thrilled about it. And their production went up to the point that it just blew the research, because no matter how much Mayo adjusted the lights, it didn't matter. The production was still higher. It was a very interesting study, very interesting study. Then we get into the human relations movement in the 50s and 60s. This was pioneered by Abraham Maslow. He observed that his patients had certain innate needs that had to be satisfied before they could reach their fullest potential. And let's take a look at this. Let me where is my thing? Let me stop sharing. We're going to get to McGregor in a second. Let me stop sharing. All right. And let's go to the video. Oh, 1 second. I do have it set up, I swear, I promise. There we go. All right. Now share screen. So let's watch about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then we'll talk about Maslow after this.
One of the most legendary ideas in the history of psychology is located in an unassuming triangle divided into 5 sections referred to universally simply as Maslow's pyramid of needs. This profoundly influential pyramid first saw the world in an academic journal in the United States in 1943, where it was crudely drawn in black and white and surrounded by dense and jargon-rich text. It has since become a mainstay of psychological analyses, business presentations, and TED Talks, and grown ever more colourful and emphatic in the process. The pyramid was the work of a 35-year-old Jewish psychologist of Russian origins called Abraham Maslow, who'd been looking since the start of his professional career for nothing less than the meaning of life. No longer part of the close-knit orthodox family of his youth, Maslow wanted to find out what could make life purposeful for people, himself included, in modern-day America, a country where the pursuit of money and fame seemed to have eclipsed any more interior or authentic aspirations. He saw psychology as the discipline that would enable him to answer the yearnings and questions that people had once taken to religion. He suddenly saw that human beings could be said to have essentially 5 different kinds of need. On the one hand, the psychological, or what one could term, without any mysticism being meant by the word, the spiritual, and on the other, the material. For Maslow, we all start with a set of utterly non-negotiable and basic physiological needs for food, water, warmth, and rest. In addition, we have urgent safety needs for bodily security and protection from attack. But then we start to enter the spiritual domain. We need belongingness and love. We need friends and lovers. We need esteem and respect. And lastly, and most grandly, we are driven by what Maslow called, in a now legendary term, an urge for self-actualization, a vast, touchingly nebulous, and yet hugely apt concept involving what Maslow described as living according to one's full potential and becoming who we really are. Part of the reason why the description of these needs, laid out in pyramid form, has proved so persuasive is their capacity to capture a profound structural truth about human existence. Maslow was putting his finger with unusual deftness and precision on a set of answers to very large questions that tend to confuse and perplex us viciously, particularly when we're young. Namely, what are we really after? What do we long for? And how do we arrange our priorities and give due regard for the different and competing claims we have on our attention? Maslow was reminding us with artistic concision of the shape of an ideal, well-lived life, proposing at once that we cannot live by our spiritual callings alone, but also that it cannot be right to remain focused only on the material either. We need, in order to be whole, both the material and the spiritual realms to be attended to, the base lending support while the summit offers upward direction and definition. Maslow was rebutting calls from 2 kinds of zealots. Firstly, overardent spiritual types who might urge us to forget entirely about money, housing, a good insurance policy, and enough to pay for lunch. But he was also fighting against extreme, hard-nosed pragmatists who might imply that life was simply a brute process of putting food on the table and going to the office. Both camps had, for Maslow, misunderstood the complexity of the human animal, Unlike other creatures, we truly are multifaceted, called at once to unfurl our soul according to its inner destiny, and to make sure we'll be able to pay the bills at the end of the month. Operating at the heyday of American capitalism, Maslow was interestingly ambivalent about business. He was awed by the material resources of large corporations around him, but at the same time he lamented that almost all their economic activity was, unfairly and bizarrely, focused on honoring customers' needs at the bottom of his pyramid. America's largest companies were helping people to have a roof over their heads, feeding them, moving them around, and ensuring they could talk to each other long distance. But they seemed utterly uninterested in trying to fulfill the essential spiritual appetites defined on the higher slopes of his pyramid. Towards the end of his long life, Maslow expressed a hope that businesses could, in time, learn to make more of their profits from addressing not only our basic needs, but also, and as importantly, our higher spiritual and psychological ones as well. That would be truly enlightened capitalism. In the personal sphere, Maslow's pyramid remains a hugely useful object to turn to whenever we're trying to assess the direction of our lives. Often, as we reflect upon it, we start to notice that we really haven't arranged and balanced our needs as wisely and elegantly as we might. Some lives have got an implausibly wide base. All the energy seems directed towards material accumulation. At the same time, there are lives with an opposite problem, where we've not paid due heed to our need to look after our fragile and vulnerable bodies. Maslow's beautifully simple visual cue is, above anything else, a portrait of a life lived in harmony with the complexities of our nature. We should, at our less frantic moments, use it to reflect with newfound focus on what it is we might do next.
Our decision dice are a tool to help you
So Maslow is important in management. Maslow is also important in marketing. You will study Maslow in both aspects of business. That pyramid of needs, the two bottom ones, the physiological and the safety needs, if those aren't met, your people can't focus on anything. If you're, especially the physiological, right? If you can't breathe, can you think of anything else than getting air? If you don't have food, can you think of anything else than finding a way to get food? If you don't have a roof over your head, if you don't have clothes on your back, then you get into safety needs. You have to be able to walk down your street. You have to be able to lock your apartment. You have to be able, I mean, there's all these little things. They're very basic. And management in the old days, in the classical era, was focusing on those needs. Maslow said there's all these needs above that you're not even looking at. People need to belong. People need to have esteem. They need to be respected. People need to be able to self-actualize. They need to be able to grow and develop into something. And self-actualization doesn't have to be a huge event. You often hear it refers to as, oh, I became an astronaut, went to space, or I wrote a great book. It doesn't have to be something like that. Getting a college degree is a self-actualization. For a lot of people, getting married and having kids is a self-actualization. Getting that job you always wanted is a self-actualization. I mean, you're going to do it several times in your life. But when you're managing, you have to also, and you're creating management systems and you're creating ways to work with your people, you have to take those top three, the belonging needs, which people want to be part of something, they want to be loved, the esteem needs on top of that, which people want to be respected, and the self-actualization, which people want to grow. You have to take all those into account. And in Maslow's day, what he saw was they weren't taking those into account. Now, they're also used for marketing. Why? Because when you're trying to get people to buy things, if you appeal to those upper needs, their belongingness, their respect, their esteem, and their self-actualization, it's used as a method to get people to buy, to get people to market to them, get people interested in your product. We're not getting that today. That's not part of this course. I just want you to know that with Maslow, he's used in both sides, in both areas of business. So Douglas McGregor looked at what Maslow did and said, okay, you're right. We have managers who just look at the bottom needs and basically, as long as I'm paying you, got a roof over your head, you can eat, what do you care? And he said, but good management should be, yeah, but I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to help you and I'm going to, get you to where you need to be. So Douglas McGregor came to realize there were two theories of management, what he called two theories of management. And you're going to watch a video of it when you do your discussion question. He came up with theory X and theory Y. And theory X basically are managers who assume people were lazy, assumed that people didn't want to work, assumed that people were not, basically just worthless. Theory Y assumed that people didn't want to work, that they get something out of it, that they want to grow, that they want to achieve, that type of thing. So two different things, two totally different things. And two different approaches to management. And we'll talk about McGregor more down the road, because I'll give you stories. I'm not going to do it today. It's going to take up too much time. But I'll give you the stories of some of the managers I worked with when I first came out of college. And a lot of those guys were theory X guys. And we were coming out of college as theory Y guys. And hold on one second. All right, guys, I got to pause. Take a 2-minute break. All right. I just realized I locked my wife out. All right. Take a break. 3 minutes. We'll go back at 7:10. Because it's habit, I just naturally locked the door. I didn't do it on purpose. Come on. Yes, I'll take a lead shot. Come here. Come here. Yeah, we forgot. Come on. All right, so we're back. So that was McGregor. And again, we're going to touch on theory X and Y, and you're going to work on it in your discussion question, get a little more of it, so you have a better understanding of it. There's a really good video in that discussion question too. So behavioral science, the approach, it relies on scientific research for developing theories about human behavior. So they're still using scientific research, but they're not approaching people as being just cogs and pieces of machines anymore. The disciplines that behavioral science include psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics. So they were looking at a lot of different things as they started to develop the behavioral science approach. And they were teaching us this in college. When I was in college in the early 80s, in the early to mid 80s. And to be honest with you, we got out of college and we still ran into a lot of guys not using it. So there was kind of a back and forth at first until we finally got enough people coming out of colleges that were buying into it. And then they said, all right. And the theory X guys started retiring, the guys who want to treat people like crap. The quantitative viewpoints, operations management and evidence-based management. Operations management is about being more effective, and it really is. I was in operations management my whole career. And evidence-based management is facing hard facts and rejecting nonsense, which is a huge part of management as well. So when you start talking about operations management, you talk about all the job functions, activities that managers do. Well, we schedule and delegate work, and we do job training. We plan production to meet customers' needs. We design services customers want and how to deliver them. We figure out how to get it to the customers in the best way. We locate and design company facilities and trying to make them as efficient as possible. And we choose optimal levels of product inventory to keep costs down and reduce back orders. And man, that is one of the hardest parts of the job. And we will get into that further on in the course. But inventory management, yeah, that's it's an art and a science. I'll put it that way, which makes it harder. So we talk about evidence-based management, facing hard facts and rejecting nonsense. It's based on the beliefs that facing hard facts about what works and what doesn't. Coming to terms with things like, something a lot of times becomes ingrained in what you do, but then you figure out, we have to face the hard fact that this just doesn't work. Understanding the dangerous half-truths that constitute how so much conventional wisdom about management, right? Not falling into like the dogma, the misbeliefs of a company, and having the courage to change things when they need change, and rejecting the total nonsense that often passes for sound advice will help organizations perform better. I'm laughing because I remember an old manager of mine, Hap Alberson was his name, in Marriott. And he said to me one day, I was a young buck. I was right out of college working for Marriott. And he said, Tim, would you have an idea? Come to me and I'll explain to you why it won't work. Yeah, there you go. That's a great way to develop people. And he wasn't joking. I thought he was joking at first. He wasn't joking. So that would be a good example of the last bullet point there. Managers must understand how the different parts of an organization come together, how they work, and how they achieve what they're doing. Even though a system may not work very well, it nevertheless is still a system. You can tweak it, you can adjust it, but you have to have systems. That's important. That's a systems viewpoint. You have to be able to diagnose problems and solve things, solve those problems within the system. The four parts are inputs, transformational processes, outputs, and feedback. We're going to talk about that in a second. The systems may be open or closed. They could go either way. Synergy in a system creates the effect that it is greater than the sum of the individual. Synergy means the system's functioning and it comes together well. The systems viewpoint led to the complexity theory, which we're going to talk about that. So the author gives you some example of the inputs: people, money, information, equipment. Those are the inputs that go into whatever you're doing. Then you have the transformational process. In my business, like in a kitchen, that would be the cooking. The inputs will be all the food that come in the back door, the people that come in the back door of the work. The transformational process would be the cooking of the food, the cutting it up, the boiling it, the steaming it, the sauteing it, and all that. The output would be the product on the plate itself that goes to the customer. So everyone eats in a restaurant. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. That's the products, the services, the profits, the losses, the employee satisfaction, the discontent, all that. He uses an example on here, and his is good. He uses a jewelry store or a jewelry maker. And the feedback would be information about the reaction of the environment to the outputs, which affect the inputs. Basically, people come back and, telling you what they think. That is the systems. That's the four parts of the system. We talk about the system. The contingency viewpoint, and I told you we get to this, that began to develop when managers discovered that under some circumstances, better results could be achieved by breaking the one best way rule. In other words, the beauty and simplicity of the contingency theory lies in the proposition that there's not one best way to manage. It was breaking out of the thought process that you're in. It was looking at it and saying, okay, there's more than one way to do this. Let's look at other ways. Because people get jaded. You get caught up in what you're doing. And when that happens, you're not open-minded and you're not seeing things that could be a better way to do things. You often hear, this is always the way we did it. This is always the way we did it. There's some good stuff in the book on contingency. Make sure you take a look at that. Contemporary approaches that we have today: the learning organization, sharing knowledge, high performance workplaces, shared value and sustainable development, which we'll talk about some of that in the next chapter too, and responsible management education, all that type of thing. We're going to get into each one of those. The learning organization, sharing knowledge and modifying behavior. Keep learning. Your people should always be learning, and you should want to create a culture where your individuals in your organization embrace learning and they want to get smarter and they want to grow. It's a challenge for managers. The hard part is establishing a culture where shared knowledge becomes a part of what everyone does. The 3 parts of a learning organization is creating and acquiring knowledge, transferring knowledge, and modifying behavior. This is something you'll hear called retraining. They'll talk about retraining or education in a workplace. And that's the whole idea. You're coming in and you're seeing new things and you're learning new things and you're being presented with new ideas to keep the organization fresh, to keep the organization going. That's what a learning organization is about. High performance work practices, the job of management, according to this viewpoint, is to create human resource practices that foster employee development and overall well-being. These include the ability enhancing practices, formal tests, selection tests, structured interviews, hiring standards and selectivity, high pay, training opportunities. That should all be there. I'm not a big fan of formal selection tests or structured interviews. I think there's other ways to do test interviews that could be better, but I understand what the author's saying. Motivation enhancing practices, providing rewards based on individual and group performance, and the use of formal performance evaluation systems, and merit-based promotion, promoting people who do good work, and opportunity enhancing practices, employee involvement via formal participation processes, ongoing communication, information sharing, and that sort of thing. So that's a high performance work practice. This is all modern day stuff we're talking about, guys. Shared value and sustainable value development. Sustainable development is a huge thing. We're going to talk about it more in the next chapter. But shared value and sustainable development, they look beyond short-term profits. They focus on other things, looking at the environmental costs of what you're doing. Look at the social costs of what you're doing. We're going to watch a video about Jose Andres here shortly, and he's like the king of corporate responsibility. Sustainable development focuses on meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations, taking care of society, taking care of the environment so that future generations have it to enjoy. Shared value and sustainable development is where business and sustainability intersect. So you're taking care of people, you're taking care of the environment as well. Responsible management education, he talks about the UN taking the lead on this with their PRME, their Principles for Responsible Management Education. Their goal is to transfer business and management education, research, and thought leadership globally. And while they want to promote, sustainable development and all that, I'm sure it's a good program. Honestly, I've not seen much with it. Now, for your career, recruiters do expect you to do some research just as you would for a class assignment. So if you get an interview, you got to research the company, find out some things about them, and have some questions to ask them when you walk into the interview. The interview is not just about you getting asked questions, about you asking them questions. That's good for both you and the potential employer because it helps identify the level of fit between the two of you. And they love it when you come in prepared. Trust me, when a candidate would come in for an interview prepared, I was thrilled. It may show that you're a good fit. In turn, it's associated with a more positive work attitude. And it says something about your character, right? That you're going to perform well. You're not going to quit on them quickly. And you're going to be able to handle stress. It's a good thing. And for his model of career readiness, which he has throughout the book, this is part of understanding business. Understanding business is a big part of walking in and being ready. So when you do research on a company that you're going to interview with, you should learn the following 7 things. Look at their company's mission and vision statements. Most companies will have these somewhere on their website. Now, if they're a private company, they may not, but odds are they will. If they're a corporation, if they're a publicly held corporation, they definitely will. They'll probably have something also about their core values and their culture. If they don't, go look at their social media. Their social media will be about it's mostly PR, public relations stuff about their company. That'll give you an idea of their core values and their culture. Look at the history of their company. When did they start? Where did they come from? How did they get to where they are? And know all this stuff when you walk in the interview. Know their key organizational players. Who's the president? Who's the CEO? Who's the CFO? Who's running their marketing department? Those type of things. What are their products and their services, and who are their clients? This all makes sense, right? If you're going into an interview, right? This is for your career. Know what about the company that you're about to talk to. So you walk in, they're like, wow, you actually know something about us. They'll be impressed. Current events and accomplishments, always what's going on with them right now. And comments from current or previous employers. We talk to people. Talk to people. All right. So that is chapter 2. Hold on here. Any questions on chapter 2? No? All right. Well, let's take a break. A real break this time. Not I'm going to take a break because Professor Long locked his wife out of the house, which I shouldn't have done. All right, guys. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I didn't want to start with chapter 3. We are going to do chapter 3, but I'm going to do the video. There's a video first. My apologies. My apologies. We're set up for it. Beautiful. All right. Watch a video about Chef Andres. Chef Jose Andres, when it comes to corporate responsibility and sustainability and those type of things, the guy is he's amazing. He's just absolutely amazing.
Almost from the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Chef Jose Andres and his team have been on the front lines, fighting back with warm meals. And director Ron Howard has been capturing it all on film. Tracy Smith shares a recipe for hope.
In the sea of despair that is Ukraine, here is a lifeline. Chef Jose Andres and his World Central Kitchen have been on the ground for months, feeding thousands of Ukrainians whose lives have been upended by the war.
How much are you back and forth these days?
Well, I've been more than 40 some days in Ukraine.
And for him, that's not all that unusual.
It needs to be very quick. Pa, 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 boom.
For the past 12 years, Andres has brought his not-for-profit kitchen to the front lines of catastrophe. They've served more than 60 million meals.
You never know when the call is gonna arrive. I'm from home or from where?
From earthquake-ravaged Haiti.
There's no food, no water, nothing.
To hurricane-battered Houston.
Again, we're going through very high water. Take a look. I'm so glad that we have this track.
But Ukraine is a little different. It's the first time Chef Andres and his people have operated in a war zone.
Right here is the kitchen area.
On April 16th, a missile hit one of your kitchens. How is everyone?
Well, the people that were with World Central Kitchen, we had 4 wounded persons and they went to the hospital, and thanks God, everybody was fine.
Truth is, it barely slowed them down.
What happened the hours after was unbelievable. The owner of that restaurant asked all the team members, what do you want to do? And they said, we want to keep cooking. We want to keep fighting.
We're chefs. When there is need of food, we show up and we try to feed people in need.
That drive to keep serving against all odds is the subject of a documentary streaming this month on Disney Plus called We Feed People from director Ron Howard.
Is it tough for you as a documentarian to remain detached from this?
I wasn't really trying to be detached. I mean, I was trying to share what I was learning and experiencing and feeling.
We're good. Okay, team huddle.
Whenever there is a fight so hungry people may eat, we will be there.
And that feeling, apparently, is contagious. The camera crews shooting footage for the film would often put down their cameras and start helping out.
I said, okay, I get it. It's infectious, this spirit, but we only have so many shooting days.
We needed every single hand to do what we did, so more often than not, that camera was always put away. They became part of the humanitarian aid. Life is not a movie itself. Life is real pain, is real suffering, and what we have to do is spend every single second trying to relieve people from those hard moments they're going through.
It's hard to imagine how he finds the time. The Spanish-born Andres is also a wildly successful restaurateur. with nearly 24 restaurants or food trucks from coast to coast. But his World Central Kitchen has become his calling card. He started it in 2010 after the Haiti earthquake. Andres and his team will typically salvage whatever's left of restaurant kitchens on the ground and, using locals' recipes, work with them to make comfort food for thousands.
You know what, I love to go to these places because I always say that the best of humanity usually shows up in the worst moments of humanity. And what I get, the inspiration I get from every one of the World Central Kitchen members, but the new people that join us in the middle of the chaos, this to me is a gift I will never be able to pay back.
I don't see this as a job, this is a call. Yes. I love your smile to the people. I love to see how much they love you. And you embrace the spirit of World Central Kitchen. Thank you.
We met up with the chef for a brief moment in New York City. He was on his way to Spain and eventually to Ukraine again.
And now you're part of it too, Ron.
Well, I'm thrilled to be part of it. It's an honor.
Howard says he was drawn to Jose Andres' unbelievable story, but at first the chef balked at doing the film, worried that it'd be all about him.
He was hesitant. He said, this is really World Central Kitchen. I don't want a camera following me around trying to tell the Jose story.
Howard managed to convince him by bringing up another movie he'd once made.
Houston, we have a problem.
I said, did you ever see Apollo 13?
Apollo 13, you recall, was about an explosion aboard a spacecraft.
This is what I love, our teams coming together and solving a problem.
I want this marked.
And the people on the ground who gave their all to bring the astronauts home alive.
We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that.
Apollo 13 is also the movie that got Ron Howard interested in telling real-life stories, even though at an early test screening, one of the audience members actually thought Howard had made it all up.
This is Odyssey. It's good to see you again.
I remember it was a 23-year-old Caucasian male, rated it poor, wouldn't recommend it, terrible, more Hollywood bull with 2 exclamation marks. They would never survive. 3 exclamation marks. I realized he didn't know it was a true story. And to him, it was hokey. And I thought, well, this is why you choose these subjects. This is why you tell a story based on real events, because you choose a subject where you say, how the hell could that have happened?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question for World Central Kitchen. How the hell could this have happened? Really?
Yeah, it starts there.
I mean, I know that very often people think we do the impossible possible. And I would love to tell you that what we do, we are the only people capable in planet Earth to do it. But this is far away from the truth. What we do is not so special.
Of course, what makes them special is that they step up to help. Not next week, not tomorrow, but right now.
Why do you think it works? I know you say we don't have meetings, we don't make announcements, we just go.
If we say we don't plan, it's because every hour you are planning for something is 1 hour you are missing of being on the ground feeding people. And sometimes you say, but you need to organize to start feeding people. Well, not really. You can always be driving. And you may decide to make right or make left. And you don't know if you're taking the right turn. But let me tell you one thing, my friend. You will only be able to turn right or left if you are moving forward. It's never a wrong decision in an emergency if actually you are making things happen, because you have the next day to correct that decision. At the end, it's always good because you are moving, you are driving forward, you are meeting the needs of the people.
Recibo, mam. Guapa. Wait.
Pretty amazing guy. Pretty amazing guy. We're going to refer to this video as we go through and talk about this next chapter. But Chef Andres and what he accomplishes and what he does is amazing. And he is the epitome of a lot of what we are about to talk about, because he has a whole restaurant empire he could be focusing on. He does focus on it. I know his business partner. I know Rob Wilder, great guy. I've never met Chef Andres, but I know Rob. And yes, World Central Kitchen is a giant part of what they do, but they also have Think Food Group, which is based right here in DC. And they're all about doing the right thing. And World Central Kitchen is part of what they do when they're doing the right thing. In chapter 3, the manager's work, environment, and ethical responsibilities, doing the right thing is what chapter 3 is about. So it starts off talking about the triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit, and younger workers and their search for meaning. The triple bottom line came up a few years back. It's a corporate view, a view of corporate performance, actually, that the organization has a responsibility to the people, the planet, and to make a profit. I like this because for a long time, since like the mid-70s, it's been all about making a profit. And an economist way back in the early 70s, Milton Friedman, came out with a thing right when the country was becoming very socially responsible and said, well, this is not part of business. Business is all about making a profit and giving money to their shareholders. Well, yes, that's a big part of it, but it can't be what you're all about. And Chef Jose Andres shows that. He doesn't make any money off of World Central Kitchen. They don't make a dime off World Central Kitchen. In fact, World Central Kitchen probably costs them money. They get a lot of big donations because of who they are, but they do a lot of good too. And he is right in the middle of something the minute it happens. Success in these areas can be measured through a social audit. We'll get a little bit into that too. So younger workers are different than the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. The millennials, which are born between 81 and 96, and the Gen Zers are born after 97, they care about this triple bottom line. They expect more from their organizations. They expect their organizations to be socially responsible. They expect their organizations to respect sustainability and to have it as part of the processes. They want things in work that mean something to them and products that represent their values. The older generations, we weren't into that so much. We should have been, to be honest with you. They think a lot about the stakeholders. You have internal and external stakeholders. Two environments, and we talked about stakeholders in chapter 1. We've already touched on this. Stakeholders are individuals or companies that are affected by your company, but you have internal ones and external ones. And you have to operate in both of these environments, and you have to manage and do things with keeping these two types of stakeholders in thought. Your internal stakeholders, whether your organization is big or small, it doesn't matter. Your employees, your owners, your board of directors, right? Those are the internal stakeholders. Those are the people that every day, whatever the company does, they are affected by it. And they also affect the company by their actions. Your community of stakeholders also has your external stakeholders. If you look here, and we're going to go a little more into this in a second, but your external stakeholders go into two different environments, your general environment and your task environment. Your outer circle, your general environment, economic forces. We talked all about economics before. Actually, we didn't. I'm sorry. We'll get more into economics class. My other class talked about economics. We'll get more into economics, but economic forces, if you took Business 100, we talk about how economics affects business. You know, policies the government's passing, fiscal policy, monetary policy, trends that are naturally going on, what the economy is doing, that type of thing. Technological forces, sociological forces, social cultural forces. We're going to get into these as we go into the lecture tonight. These are things you don't have much control of. The task environment, which is your next set of external stakeholders, your customers, your competitors, your suppliers, lenders, unions, that type of thing, you have some influence there. You don't have control, but you have some influence. So it's a different. The task environment has the 10 groups, and we just showed them, and he lists them here. But they interact with the organization. And you actually do have some influence with these ones. Your strategic allies, local communities are a big part of this. I mean, you have to have your local community on your side. If you don't, you're going to run into real problems. The general environment includes the 6 forces we talked about outside of it. The economic, technological, sociological, all the ones we saw on the graph. The political and legal, the international, the stuff on the outside circle. You may be able to control some of them in the task environment, but you can't control anything in the general environment. You can't. The only control you have in politics is your vote. unless you have so much money you can buy people. But that's about it. International level, probably none, unless you're the Saudis. They seem to have enough money to do anything. As a manager, you need to keep your eye on the far horizon, because these forces of the general environment can affect your long-term decision plans. So you have to watch these things, the economy, demographic changes, this type of stuff. You have to watch these things and determine your decisions based on what you see going on. It takes a little bit of predicting the future. He gives an example in the book, where marijuana is legal, where it's not legal. The whole cultural change there. By the way, Virginia, he has it listed as only medical. Virginia, marijuana is now legal. It's not legal to sell it, but you can own personal marijuana. They're going to be able to sell it in like another year or two. And a lot of these states are turning over. I mean, this is amazing. When I was in college, this was not even heard of. States having legal adult use of marijuana. But I mean, this is a cultural change. This is the kind of things in that outer circle, that general environment that you want to keep an eye on. You want to talk about ethics and values. Ethics are standards of right and wrong that influence your behavior. Your standards or your company's standards of right and wrong. Ethics standards are going to vary between countries and between cultures. Just because, you have your set of ethics from where you were brought up and how you were raised. Other people are going to have their own set of ethics. And when we do business globally, these things can clash. That's why there has to be a lot of talking. That's why there have to be certain strategies when you do global business, because you don't want to go in and start offending people in another culture because their values are different than yours. The 6 most common workplace behaviors where the ethical misconduct occurs: conflicts of interest, abusive behaviors. We're going to talk about all these in a second. Violations of health and safety regulations, corruption, discrimination, and sexual harassment. Values and value systems are underpinnings for ethics and ethical behavior. So we get into these conflicts of interest. That's when you have something that you can benefit from, or your family or friends may benefit from, but it makes it difficult for you to make the best decision for the organization, because this would really help me, but it kind of blinds you a little bit, because when it's going to benefit you, it's kind of hard to be impartial as a judge. When you're making a decision, you're going to tend to lead toward the one that benefits you, and maybe that's not the best decision. Abuse behaviors are behaviors that serve to threaten or intimidate others. These are things that create a hostile work environment. A hostile work environment you will deal with as an ethics issue more than most other things. Hostile work environment can be everything from telling dirty jokes in front of other staff who don't appreciate it, to making statements about other people's cultures that people don't appreciate. But when you do that and you and your friends think it's funny, well, maybe other people in the room don't think it's funny. You're creating a hostile work environment. You walk into the manager's office and there's a porno picture on the computer screen. That's a hostile work environment. That type of thing. That is abusive behavior, and it should go against any company's ethics. Violations of health and safety regulations. Different jobs come with different sets of rules as to what constitutes safe and healthy behavior. We have a lot of this in the industry I worked in, in the hospitality industry, because we're serving food to people. So health and safety regulations were a huge part of what we did. Corruption, that occurs when someone uses the power with which they've been entrusted by the organization to achieve personal benefit. Taking kickbacks from suppliers. Hey, will you take this off our hands? I'll pay you $200. Sure, bang, you put it in your pocket. That's wrong. Or I'll give you baseball tickets, or that kind of thing. Discrimination, big one nowadays. Everyone knows what it is. You make employment decisions based on the basis of employees' protected status. Including their sex, national origin, race, religion, age, or sexual orientation. Well, I'm not going to hire that person. Well, maybe the best person for the job. Don't base it off of one of your prejudices. And sexual harassment is just that. And by the way, we were talking about earlier about abusive behaviors. Hostile work environment is a form. If it's sexual, it's a form of sexual harassment, but there can be hostile work environment that is not sexual. Sexual harassment is either hostile work environment or what they call quid pro quo, which is basically you're requesting someone to do something in return for a favor. And no, those are ethical dilemmas. Or not, those are problems you run into with ethics. Ethical dilemmas, these are different. These take place in the organization, in their value system, and the values of their organization An ethical dilemma is the best way to describe it is you have to make a decision where both answers are wrong. Okay. And it's an ethical because, okay, no matter which decision you make, and we go through this as managers, guys, and we'll talk about this more as we get further in the course, because this is going to come up. You're going to run into situations where I either have to make decision A or decision B, and someone's going to get hurt. So what values do I use to determine which decision I should make? And your values are relatively permanent and deeply held beliefs and attitudes that determine your behavior. So you're going to come up with ethical dilemmas. You know, I have decision A or decision B. Both are going to hurt somebody. What's going to do the least damage through my point of view, in my opinion? Remember, it's always your own opinion, unfortunately. We always talk to other people and stuff, other managers. And he gives you the global median rates of the most common types of ethical misconduct, and conflict of interest, of course, is the biggest one, as is abusive behavior. Violations of safety, those are always up there. Sexual harassment is at the lower end of that scale, but it's not to be taken lightly by any stretch of the imagination. So when you're approaching an ethical dilemma, there's different approaches you can take. Utilitarian approach is what's going to be for the greatest good. And utilitarian approach is guided by what will result for the best good for the most number of people. And a lot of times when you have an ethical dilemma, a lot of managers will go this way. All right, what's going to help the most people? It's going to hurt a group over here, but what's going to help the most people? Your individual approach is for the greatest self-interest long-term, which helps others. Ethical behavior in the individual approach is guided by what will result in individuals' best long-term interests. But that also has to ultimately be serving other people's interests as well, not just your own. It's not totally self-centered. A moral rights approach, respecting fundamental rights shared by everyone. You know, it's guided by respect to fundamental rights of your human being. You know, and you look at something like the Bill of Rights, you know, and the way that was written out about, you know, what humans have the natural right to. That's a moral rights approach. The justice approach is in respecting impartial status of fairness. In the ethical behavior and the justice approach is guided by respect for impartial standards of fairness and equity. You usually have to have a team to do this. It's hard for an individual to do this on their own. You want to get other people's input, but these are different ways to handle ethical dilemmas. And we're not done talking about ethical dilemmas. This is going to pop up throughout the course. You know, white collar crime, Sarbox and ethical training. Sarbox was an act. We'll go through that in a second. You know, executives' deceits generated, that's white collar crime. They generate a lot of public outrage. You know, when rich people commit crimes and basically, you know, get a slap on the wrist, that's basically what you're talking about. White collar crime is a crime committed by like executives and high-end people in organizations usually. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was established requirements for proper financial recording for public companies. This came out after the financial crash in 2008. Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, and it was passed because part of what would cause that crash was a lot of unethical behavior. A lot of what we call cooking the books. Cooking the books is when you're not practicing generally accepted accounting principles. When you're doing things like, I'll give an example. One of the companies, I believe, was Enron. It was Enron. Enron was a big company, and they were taking their debt and they were moving it over to other companies that they own. But these other companies were what they call shell companies. They were companies on paper only. They didn't really exist. So it was making their own financial paperwork look really good because it wasn't showing all the debt they had, because the debt was over here with this other company that was just a company on paper. So they were deceiving the public to keep their stock price up. And this was this and a lot of other things that Sarbanes covered and said, look, there's now, you have to have proper financial record keeping and kind of define what that was, because we needed that. Ethical training is big too. You have to have established procedures and guidelines for audit companies. When I was working for Legal Seafood, I actually sat on the committee when the owner, Roger Berkowitz, back then, he isn't known it anymore, but he did at the time. I was very, very honored that he asked me to be on that. And he asked me he said, hey, Tim, will you come up to Boston? I was living here in DC working for him, but I went to Boston. And I sat on that committee with a few other managers. And again, I was very honored to be one of the guys that got to sit there and say, yeah, and put together an ethical statement. They actually brought in a professor of ethics from the University of Boston to come in and lecture us first to get us on the right path to doing it. It was really cool. It was a really neat thing to have done. I don't know if they still use it because they're owned by another company now, but it was really cool at the time. Ethics needs to be an everyday affair, not a one-time thing. Ethics is something you live by. There's several ways of promotion that a corporation can promote it. Create a strong ethical climate. Easier said than done. But yeah, you try to have everyday standards that promote an ethical behavior. Screening prospective employees, especially management, running background checks and that type of thing to make sure that you're not getting someone who has in the past practiced unethical behavior. Instituting ethic codes and training programs like the one I sat on. I sat on a committee that wrote a code of ethics for legal seafoods. Rewarding ethical behavior, protecting whistleblowers. A whistleblower is someone who basically tattletales. They tell when something's been gone wrong. And part of Sarbanes-Oxley was they protected whistleblowers, right? Because people are like, I can get fired and all this stuff. They put through rules that no, you're not going to get fired. You're not going to be, basically penalized anyway if you bring forth behavior that's criminal or unethical. Using multifaceted approach. You can use several of these, and you should use probably all of these. Every company should have a code of ethics. Every company should. Corporate social responsibility. Let's go right back to our chef, Jose Andres. He is the king of kosher responsibility. According to the author, it rests right at the top of the pyramid of obligations, right up there with economic, legal, and ethical obligations. Yeah, I think it does. I don't always agree with the author. I do like this book, but you hear me, and you have heard me at times say I don't agree with the author. But you should be a good corporate citizen. A corporation should be a good corporate citizen. It should be ethical in its practices. And it should keep that ethical behavior in other countries and respect what they consider ethical and unethical. If you're doing business with another country, you should obey the law and you should make a profit, but you should make it honestly. I hate managers that steal or managers that cheat to make a profit because it eventually catches up with you. You're not going to get away with it in the long run. And, cheating, fudging your numbers, taking kickbacks, all these little things, it's not going to work. You're going to end up with a bad reputation and a stain on you socially and professionally that you're never going to get rid of. Making a profit, yes, we should make a profit, but we can do it legally. It's like when I would have I remember one time, I'll never forget this, one of our food delivery guys dropped off an extra case of steaks and we didn't catch it. It was supposed to be one case, he dropped off two. It's New York strip steaks. And the chef came in, sous chef actually, the chef wouldn't have done this. Sous chef came in, he was all excited. Sous chef is the assistant chef. And he came in, he said, look, we got a free case of steaks. And I said, what? He said, we got a free case of steaks, man. We could sell these and bring down our food costs. I said, why don't you think about something for a minute? Which is more valuable? Selling those steaks and bringing your food costs down for a week, or contacting that rep, telling him he dropped off that extra case of steaks and didn't charge us, and offering to pay for it. And he thought for a moment and he goes, calling the rep. I said, yeah, because that guy's going to love you. He's going to have to account for that extra case of steaks. He's going to have to account for where it went. And he's going to get in trouble that it's gone. And we're going to profit off that? No. You call that guy up, you tell him that he gave us an extra case of steaks and we're willing to pay for it. You know what he's going to do? He's going to be your buddy forever. This is going to pay off for years down the road because you're going to develop this great relationship with him. And he might be one of the guys running that company someday, and we do business with him. So we did that. We called him up. You know what the rep said? Thank you. I love you guys. Thanks for telling me. Tell you what, those steaks are on the house. It ended up being free anyway. We ended up giving them away to the staff as prizes instead of selling them. I'm like, let's use it as an incentive, especially for the cooks in the back. Those guys don't get as much as the people in the front of the house, the waiters and bartenders and stuff. So, the corporate responsibility, social responsibility pyramid, philanthropics at the top, be a good corporate citizen, do what is desired by global stakeholders, ethical responsibility right after that, do what your global stakeholders expect, be ethical, make ethical decisions in corporation, obey the laws, the next one, and be profitable is at the bottom. Man, Jose Andres focuses a lot on those top two, ethical responsibility and philanthropic responsibility. The guy just wants to make the world a better place. And he uses he was a star. He was a celebrity chef well before he started any of this. And now you rarely see him. My wife and I love watching the cooking shows, like Chopped and all this stuff. And you rarely see him on this stuff anymore because he's so busy with his other work. And God bless him. I hope I get to meet the guy someday. I think I might. Because like I said, I do business with his business partner, Rob, every once in a while. But every time I've gone over there, their offices are right in DC. They're right on D Street over in Penn Quarter. And I've been to their offices, but Chef Andres has never been there when I've gone there. So you get arguments against social responsibility. That first bullet point, unless a company focuses on maximizing profit, it'll become distracted and fail to provide goods and services. You're not benefiting your stockholders. You're not creating jobs. You're not expanding the economy. The other argument against this is this supports the efforts of companies to set up headquarters in name only and offshore tax havens in order to minimize their tax burden. You know what? No. If you're taking care of people, people are going to take care of you. If you're taking care of the public's going to take care of you. And it can't be all about making a profit, and it can't be all about the almighty dollar, because in the long run, that's not what really is going to benefit you. The arguments for social responsibility: a company must be concerned for society's welfare. You have to be. You function in society. You have to be aware for concerned for its welfare. And beyond ethical obligation, there's a rationale for social responsibility. That's a belief that it is good for business, morally appropriate, and important for employees. It is important for employees, which makes it good for business. You don't want turnover. Turnover costs a lot of money. Turnover is when employees leave. If you're socially responsible, it sounds weird, but it gives them one more reason to stay. If you can give them one more reason to stay, you're going to save yourself a lot of money, and they're going to be more productive. I know it sounds weird, but it's true. Different things, one type of social responsibility, climate change, it's occurring. I don't get any political argument about why it's occurring, but it's occurring. The world is warming. They measure it. It's happening. And we have to make adjustments and changes because it's happening. If you're not on top of this, and if you're not helping the areas that this is affecting, down in my own state here in Norfolk, Virginia, in the last few years, they've been moving their air conditioning units from their base down on their ground up on top of their buildings. Why? Because the water levels are rising. Because places are flooding that never flooded before. If you're a corporation, you want to get involved in stuff like that. You want to make that part of what you do, right? That's part of being sustainable. That's part about caring for people. Scientists say global warming is a clear and unequivocal emergency. It is. And it's going to get worse. And we need to be on top of it. And that's part of a sustainable development, taking care of the environment, doing things to try to keep this from happening and working with it as it occurs. Because, guys, we may slow it down. We're not going to stop it. I'm going to tell you that right now. Undertaking philanthropy. I love this. Not dying rich. Andrew Carnegie. I'm from outside of Pittsburgh. Andrew Carnegie was a Pittsburgh man. And he was a steel mill magnate back in the day. And he did say this: he who dies rich dies thus disgraced. Andrew Carnegie tried to give all his money away. He was not able to do it. That's why you see theaters and libraries and philanthropies, all this stuff with the Carnegie name on it. That was all from Andrew Carnegie. Not Carnegie. The places still exist. We have a university in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, named after him. He put the money down for it with Mellon, who was also a big banking guy out of Pittsburgh. Bill and Melinda Gates, Bill Gates, who created Windows, Microsoft, they have pledged to spend billions on health education and overcoming poverty. They are trying to wipe out polio in the world, and they're getting closer to do it every year. And the Gates have been joined by 169 other billionaires from 22 other countries. So yeah, there is a value to it. Indeed, it pays to be ethical and socially responsible. It does. Chef Andres is just, people just love him, and his company does well, and he does a great service to the world, and his company does well, and his people love working for him because of the wonderful things that he and his company do. And that's just makes every place, it just makes society a better place. An organization's commitment to CSR may be an important factor for you if you're considering job searches. And I know a lot of younger generation, it is important to you. Corporate governance and ethics, good corporate governance Can contribute to more ethical and social responsible organizations? Absolutely. It has to start with the CEO and the board and all that. They have to be into corporate social responsibility. Corporate governance is about such matters as long-term strategies, sustainable finances, accurate reporting, being ethical, doing things right, and taking care of our environment. When I say our environment, not just our natural environment, our social environment as well. And he puts this into your career readiness competencies as well. Professional work ethic, professionalism and work ethic. So focus on the greater good and being more ethical. Reduce your carbon footprint. My wife and I recycle. Foster emotions in yourself and others, positive emotions. I said just emotions, positive emotions. Smile. I used to always check myself at the door. I was a general manager most of my career. And I would walk into that place. And I had a lot of people that worked for me. And I knew that whatever emotion I was projecting walking in that door was going to affect everybody, because it rolls downhill, guys. It does. And I always try to walk in with a smile on my face and a positive attitude, even if I wasn't having a good morning. Why? I didn't want the staff to see that. I wanted the staff to hey, we're going to have a good time working with Tim today. That's what I wanted. Spend time in nature. Tell you what, I walk my dog. Some of it's in nature, some of it's not, because I live in Old Town. But it's a great thing. It makes you feel good. It gets your spirits up. Get a proper amount of sleep. Get your 7 hours. Get at least 7 hours at night. Increase your level of exercise. Yeah, I need to do that. Expand your awareness of social realities. Pretty good with that. I work hard with my charity. And I tell you what, working hard with the charity is fulfilling. It's fulfilling. We had a great fundraiser on Sunday. We actually had an Irish luau at Murphy's here in Old Town, Alexandria, and raised $3,000 for the charity. It was fantastic. Fulfill your promises, keep your appointments, especially both. Be on time, keep your appointments. If you promise something to somebody, come through and fulfill that promise. And don't hang out with people who lack integrity. Surround yourself with good people. That's going to help. Purchase fair trade items. In other words, purchase items that have come from good, fair corporate practices. No child labor, no slave labor, that type of thing. Purchase good, fair trade. People are getting paid well and getting a fair deal on their dollar. Don't purchase items that are ethically made or sourced, that aren't ethically made or sourced, right? Don't do it. Again, child labor, that type of thing. Bring your own grocery bags. I'm pretty good at this. I'm not great at it. When I go to Wegmans, I'm good. We keep them in the car. And I go to Wegmans, I bring my own. And don't buy knockoffs. Buy the actual thing. Don't buy knockoffs. A lot of times the knockoff is a ripoff. It really is. All right, so that's chapter 3. And we talked about Chef Andres quite a bit. All right. So, where are we here? Let's talk about your test real quick. Where are we? Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. So if you look in Google, if you look in Canvas, right? You have your 2 lectures from today. You now have both the videos from today, if you want to watch again. There's your discussion 4, which is due next week. I didn't give you extra time on that because you don't need the book to do the discussion. All right. I gave you extra time on assignment 1. I'm going to check. I think most people did it. And there's your test. Now, look at those tests, procuring enabled. So you're taking the test on the McGraw-Hill Connect site. So when you click it, it's going to take you there and you take the test there and it'll load into your book. Now, into your grade book here in Canvas. It's a 30-question test. It is 100 points. And the number of questions in the formats will vary. This is true and false and multiple choice. But one of the things I did, because we didn't have this in Canvas, but they have this on this site, and I like it, is you have until, right there it says it, June 22nd. You have until June 22nd to complete the test. And I did that because I know a few people were behind on getting the book. However, most of the time you only have 1 week to take the test. Now, you take the test, and then if you miss the test, each day you miss the test, your grade drops by 10%. All right. So if you don't take the test within the 2 weeks, the first day is going to drop 10%, second day is going to drop 20%, third day your two grades is going to drop 30%, 40%. So take the test. And don't come to me asking for extension. No, test is still open. You're just not going to get the full grade. And I said, I've never used this before because Canvas never offered it, but this one does. So if there's any question on any of that, please let me know. All right, or anything else this evening? Other than that, we are done, unless there's any questions. Are we cool? All right, guys. Did I get everyone? One quick, I'm sorry, I keep holding you guys up real quick. One more thing. Did I get everybody? Did I get everybody in attendance? Bradley, did you ever show up? Bradley Carvajal? Shayla Johnson, did you ever show up? Carlos, I think I got you. Yo, Carlos, I got you. There you go. I got you now. So Shayla, Bradley, no. Adam Tran. Did Adam Tran ever show up?
I'm here.
All right, got you, Adam. All right. All right, guys. That's it. Everyone have a good evening. We're done.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Have a good night. Take care.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Have a good night.
Professor?
Yes.
I want to make sure, is there two books do you get, or is it just one? I just wanted to
There's only
make
one book, sure.
Okay, I don't know why I thought you said two in last class.
No, please don't do that to yourself. No, there's only one book. All right.
Okay, and then does that one like have some access code, or do we can just get it anywhere? Or there's
You should be able to get it online and check with the bookstore. They should have it. The online version is fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Take care.
You too.
Thank
Anyone
you.
else? Kaylin? Question?
Have a great day.
Thank you, Kaylin. You take care.